All right, I'm about to go to bed, but before I do that, I'm going to dump the following. Any number of things could happen. I mean, at any time, really, if you think about it. Life, moving through the world, what you do, where you're at, the things going on around you, the things that you're completely unaware of. Everything is actually a lot more dangerous and risky than you probably realize. In terms of where I see events in the world going, I believe a lot of what's going on is for the purpose of control, manipulation. There are strategic moves in play that supposedly block some person from doing a thing by having another thing happening. Or that statistically speaking, in history, every instance of a person in a particular position while a certain event is happening tends to win re-election. All these things. And this is not a political video. This is not about those people. It's not about any of that. I'm just saying that this is part of the catalyst. Undue influence upon our government from private and other countries' governments, interests. A lot of the events catalyzed by things like that are like protests. And a lot of what protest occurs is typically these days a controlled opposition or a controlled resistance. So, like, okay, there's a trucker convoy with rallies for the border. Besides selling merch, what exactly are we actually doing? Are they blocking throughways? Are they actively seeking border crossers? Like, what are they doing? Are they just driving around wasting diesel, honking their horns? Yeehaw. Farmer protests in Europe, kind of wonder about the same thing. They're still doing it. The rules changed. The other thing, what if farmers are going out and doing it again? Like, okay, really? All these things. Disputes among various facets of a nation within and amongst each other. Veritable civil war, as it were. And not just that, there's climate stuff, space geophysics, all kinds of things. Could be a space rock that we just didn't see coming. Could be solar super flares, micronovas, all kinds of things. Something nearby goes supernova, Betelgeuse goes off, and we get fried. There's all kinds of things that could always happen at any time. Vacuum, false vacuum, metastability, collapse event could happen. All kinds of things could happen. Now, with that being said, if there is a situation that arises where effectively society has collapsed, it is unsafe to travel, utilities are all long-term gone, 6 months or more. This includes food supply chain, the ability to store, refrigerate. If the electrical grid goes out for a number of different reasons, there are ways that could cause a failure to have electricity one way or another, whether it's an attack on the grid or whether it's something that causes there to be nobody there to man the stations, thereby they have to be shut off. How do you think your gas is pumped? How do you think your milk is kept cool? If you have an electric stove, how are you heating your anything? Microwave? Yeah. Things break down very, very quickly when that happens. People get desperate. It is possible that neighborhoods can gather together, support each other. There are always going to be outliers. I'm not going to go into any of the philosophical discussion on what to do about your neighbors in such an event. It's out there. You can find it, is my point. I'm not originating a thought on that. First, people go to the store. Stores run out. For whatever reason, supply chain gets broken. Trucks can't or won't deliver. When the stores run out, panic ensues. Everything else gets looted. In that process, lives are lost on both the people looting and the people defending their property. It's just a mathematical certainty. It will occur. Law enforcement in these situations may try and do something about it, but they may be overwhelmed if there's more people that are panicking out there than there are law enforcement. And either law enforcement gets hasty, acts on the crowd attacks law enforcement, or law enforcement withdraws, decides they need to go home and take care of their own domiciles because people's houses are next up. And again, neighborhoods. So now you've got what equates to kind of gang warfare almost for survival, for the limited resources, as many people will not be armed. Many people will not have a means to get meat in their diet. Try and be like, oh shit, we better learn how to cultivate vegetables after the fact. And of course, some people will survive. And the people with those skills, as long as they don't get taken out by hasty idiots for stupid non-reasons, will be able to help others survive. If you live rurally, as I do, there are rules. You can't have electricity. Generators are a thing. Fuel can be costly, but more importantly, generators make noise. And a lot of the time, out in the country, you can hear sounds from a mile away or more. I can clearly hear when people are coming down the road long before they get here, or anywhere up the road that they're going. I guess at the distance and time and volume change at which house they stopped at, because it can be that finely determined. Generators cause noise. Machinery causes noise. If there is a concern that someone may be scouting for places that clearly have survival stuff, maybe a source of food, at which point a large roving band of people, 30 to 50 thick, would go out and start checking houses. Except out here, pretty much just about everyone is armed. Better than average chance that the homeowner survives. Or at least homeowner is not one of the casualties compared to however many invaders there are. In my case, without giving explicit detail, I'm familiar with the landscape and everything around. And I know that it's also somewhat possible, although tedious, to come from other directions than just the road. You have to figure out how you're going to filter your water. You can't just drink rainwater. You can't just drink water out of a creek or a spring. You kind of need to filter it. You kind of need to sanitize it. You got to figure out something to do when the toilet paper runs out. That was the whole thing 3.5 years ago. 4 years ago. So a lot of reasons, a lot of things can happen. And the ultimate culmination of those tends to roughly equate to the same, which is a rapid return to a more primitive lifestyle. If you're trying to not attract attention to your neighborhood and you have some food stockpile or whatever, but you got a kid and your kid's been raised on internet, TV, devices, and all that shit's gone, your whiny kid's a liability. I'm not saying like, blame your kid. I'm just saying everybody should be considering the value of getting used to not being addicted to technology, of not living exclusively with the benefit of electricity. I know here I am sitting with electric lights on. Power goes out, I'm okay. I got stuff to do. Most people, I would guess, probably don't. I was watching a blacksmith channel, The Path of Fire, and there was a little bit of comment dialogue about something that she had mentioned in the video about the particular project she was doing on that video. She was doing this almost entirely by hand and from materials that were cultivated, mined herself or whatever. She'd made bloom steel from soil and then made a blade. But the discussion was about the fact that a lot of skills involve like electricity. And when the electricity goes, do your skills also go? Once there's no power, what other skills do you have? And it kind of goes the same with, things to do. Do you have books? Do you have acoustic instruments? Like, gonna need things to do in spare time, because there's going to be a lot of hard work too. It's like, you get used to, I spent it was 4 months completely unemployable. Had somebody helping cover my bills, so I had power and whatnot else. But even with that, I settled into a very regular routine of waking up around sunrise or just after, getting up, preparing to face the day, and then going out and doing stuff. This means, preparing for the winter firewood in advance. Wood takes time to season. Or, these are just things I've learned living out here, and with the circumstances of, electrical issues that killed my fridge, of having a furnace that doesn't work in the wintertime. For a 4-month period of time, if the food runs out, if something else happens, what around here that grows am I actually able to eat and survive? That's, the kind of stuff people need to be thinking about. I know it sounds morbid. It sounds macabre. Boo fucking who. Something's going to happen. I do not see any positive outcome, because the other possible outcome besides a societal collapse is totalitarianism. And you don't want that. I don't want that. I personally would rather, get completely blasted by the tank rolling down the street, which is not going to happen like that, by the way. But I would rather go down fighting totalitarianism than, live under it. So there is that possibility that, every aspect of resistance or protest is a charade, that any aspect of selecting our leadership is in fact a charade. If that all was the case, the government would be basically illegitimate at that point anyway, constitutionally speaking. And the whole thing with these people, they are bound by the authority given to them by the people based on the Constitution. And if they completely invalidate the Constitution, they actually invalidate any quote unquote legal right to rule. And then at that point, they're just tyrants. And the founding fathers wrote extensively about what is to be done about tyrants. That's why we have a country now. But absent that, the distinct likelihood is a lot of areas probably will retain some semblance of order, at least for some time, but there are going to be dangerous people who will be emboldened. And it's going to come a point where they're not going to really be able to feasibly enforce the law on people defending themselves against other people. Like to say, okay, well, we're going to decide whether or not this was a murder. They're just going to be like, the guy attacked you, you shot him, okay, that's that. It's going to be a little bit Wild West. And outside of city limits, it's going to be a little bit more pioneer. Granted, we've got knowledge and understanding. I've got textbooks. If we were reduced at this time to a Stone Age, we would very quickly become Bronze Age, if not better, because the knowledge is still there. The ability to rebuild is still there at this time. But in the meantime, it could be really rough. It could be 6 months or a year or more before, things like power and transportation infrastructure are really back up and running completely. And economically, nothing's going to survive like that. You hear people talking about that reset. If that reset isn't based on something like this and trying to say, here, we'll help you, we have a system so you can live and do normal things. Unfortunately, I do think there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be like, oh, okay, I want to get back to the way it used to be. And it's like, nothing can ever go back from what it once was. Everything is always progressing. There is no returning things. It's like that, make America great again. It's like, well, I mean, I get the sentiment, but the thing is, like, there is no returning to any other past point in time. There is no return to any glory days. You'll get to where you were during the glory days, and you will not see the glory. So it's dangerous because there are irresponsible people, but it is necessary that everyone be armed, as many people as possible, so that everyone is able to defend themselves against everyone else. And in the case of a lawless societal collapse, the armed society remains a polite society because nobody wants to get blown away. Everyone needs to be getting used to distancing themselves from this electronic lifestyle. And here's the hidden secret benefit to that. The electronic lifestyle is part of the system of control. So distancing yourself from it frees yourself from it. And that's the big takeaway. When shit hits fan and society falls down, all that propaganda will basically cease. They don't want that to happen, which is why I consider totalitarianism is a possibility as well. Because the people that are engineering and catalyzing all of this nonsense are either doing it because they want it to collapse, in which case they lose all power, or they're doing it because they want us to fear collapse and move toward totalitarianism as an alternative to collapse, because scary. Or they want as many people as possible to perish in as efficient manner as possible, which is to say, it may take a long time for everyone to eat each other alive or whatever, but it costs the controllers less to not have to enforce laws or do any of the other stuff. Until such time as enough people are left that are able to be the service class for the machines that make all the things for the rich people, so that they can then continue to live their fun lifestyle. And then, of course, the people working the service class are probably well rewarded too. But you're talking about 500,000 total human population at that time, which means you and me and everyone else that any of us know is probably not on that list. So should be obvious. Looking at everything that's going on, as crazy as everything is, as unfeasible, impractical as so much of what is in practice right now actually is. It can only go like this for so long before the system breaks, people lose their shit, society collapses. Food riots, roving bandits, the gun becomes the law of the land. And is certainly a better alternative to totalitarianism. 100%, hands down, no doubt about it, no question. A better alternative to totalitarianism is anarchistic libertarianism, the Wild West. That's better than living under Stalin. Trust me.